Okay. Leman achai v're'ai, leman achai v're'ai, adabrana, adabrana, shalom bach, leman achai v're'ai, leman achai v're'ai, adabrana, adabrana, shalom bach, leman ben Hashem Elokeinu avak shatov lach, leman ben Hashem Elokeinu avak shatov lach, la 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 la, oh la 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 do, no la 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 la, oh la 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 la, oh la 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 do. Because of my brothers and friends, because of my brothers and friends, please let me ask, please let me sing peace to you. Because of my brothers and friends, because of my brothers and friends, please let me ask, please let me sing peace to you. This is the house of the Lord. I wish the best for you. This is the house of the Lord. I wish the best for you. Tazuli chaver, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la.
That was Shlomo Carlebach. And welcome once again to the Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vrettos, and I'm a sociologist who's taught at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and Yeshiva University here in New York. Those of you who have been watching the Radical Imagination over the past 4 years know that we've been committed to bringing voices of progressive, radical change and alternative narratives to the show. People from all walks of life who express and live imaginative and creative lives. Lives that are playful, fun, serious, committed, joyful, authentic, and passionate. We've understood, as our guest today does, that past efforts by liberal and progressive forces to move beyond a visionless and heartless world of compromised politics and economics has to a considerable extent failed. They failed, at least partly, because they haven't included enough of a spiritual dimension in their political, economic, and intellectual analysis and activism. They've often missed the most important reality and needs of human beings: love, a revolutionary love that could create a caring society and world. Progressives and others, however, are increasingly understanding this. Human rights and criminal justice activist Michelle Alexander has recently written, "We need much more than a political revolution. We also need a moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. a revolutionary love for all people and for life itself. That will ultimately determine our collective fate. Cornel West and David Kyman Lee have developed and are teaching courses and concepts of radical love at Union Theological Seminary in New York, Connecticut College, and Harvard. As Cornell puts it, justice is what love looks like in public, just as tenderness is what love looks like in private. Feminist activist and psychologist Carol Gilligan and her husband, psychiatrist Jim Gilligan, have written extensively on the centrality of caring in women's and children's development and the role of love in breaking cycles of violence. As they poignantly put it, the human soul, the human psyche, needs love in order to survive, just as the body needs oxygen in order to survive. Without love, the soul cannot survive. It dies. Social movements around the world, from Women Wage Peace in Israel to climate activists in Extinction Rebellion, now involved in the largest climate global hunger strike in history, to the Poor People's Movement with Reverend William Barber, who is calling for a moral revolution of values, to the countless other activists and people around the world, the central concepts of revolutionary love are becoming major organizing principles for their work. Social activist Naomi Klein writes, "We're looking to brands for poetry and for spirituality because we're not getting those things from other communities or from each other." Medea Benjamin, co-founder of the anti-war organization Code Pink, calls for us to go beyond the be realistic command of our ruling elites and embrace the beautiful and love-filled world of revolutionary love. For the first time this year, a major party in a presidential campaign includes a major spiritual progressive thinker as a candidate, Marianne Williamson. And the list goes on and on. Our guest today has just published an exciting major new book that will be central to understanding this burgeoning new field of activism, study, and inquiry. The work is called Revolutionary Love, a Political Manifesto to Heal and Transform the World. He puts it this way: much of the suffering of our society, including most of its addictions and the growing embrace of right-wing neo-fascist nationalism, is driven by frustrated needs for community, for love, for respect, and connections to a higher purpose in life. We need to speak to the heart and address the pain so many people experience. We need a civilization infused with love. Rabbi Michael Lerner is the editor of Tikkun Magazine. He's the author of 11 books, including 2 national bestsellers. I used his Blacks and Jews, Let the Healing Begin book, co-authored with Cornel West at Yeshiva University for many years. The book and the openness of the dialogue within it was much appreciated by many of my students and opened up many hearts and minds, much to my happy surprise and amazement. Michael is the recipient of numerous awards, including the 2019 Humanitarian Award by the International Association of Sufism and the Morehouse College's King Gandhi Award for his work for peace and nonviolence. God willing, he may yet win one from one of the major American Jewish organizations as well. I've never joined a congregation in my life, but Michael has become my congregate rabbi, dear friend and comrade for close to 30 years of my life. He's zooming into the show from the beautiful and hopefully fire-free Berkeley Hills in California. Welcome, Michael Lerner, to the Radical Imagination.
Well, thank you, Jim. Glad to be with you.
We're glad to see you, and there you are. And I've got your back in case I see any flames coming up there. I'll let you know, but you're safe now, right? The fires have passed, and okay, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So listen, Michael, you've got this tremendous book just published, Revolutionary Love, a Political Manifesto to Heal and Transform the World. Tell us a little about your efforts here, why you're writing this book at this time. How is it a continuation of some of the work that you've been doing over the many decades, and how is it a contribution to new and progressive and much needed thought?
Okay, you said a lot in the introduction, so
Hopefully all true, right? All true.
yes, of course.
Of course, okay. Including the wish to get that award from one of the major Jewish organizations, right?
I have no such wish.
Well, they would come around to realize that you're really speaking from the prophetic tradition that they should be living by, is what I mean by that, of course, right?
Yeah, my teacher and my mentor, personal mentor at the Jewish Theological Seminary, Abraham Joshua Heschel,
Yes.
was never recognized while he was alive. The fact is that where he taught at the seminary, they didn't take it seriously at all. He was a professor of Jewish mysticism.
Mysticism, right. Yes.
And in a school that was trying to show that it was a intellectually credible institution, so it didn't take seriously anything that he was doing. They were very happy to have him go out and speak to congregations because the congregations loved him.
Right.
But when it came to the place where he was teaching, no respect. And similarly from any of the institutions of the Jewish world, he wanted to teach at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem.
Really?
They didn't give him a place. So I am not imagining awards for any of what
But this is the radical imagination, so we can imagine it, whether it comes about. It may in due course time, it may happen. But the important thing is this new book. Now, tell us a little about it.
What I am imagining is
Yes.
that the ideas in this book could make a difference in 2020 in the electoral arena, and it is not focused primarily on putting down all the, to demeaning and putting down everybody that we disagree with. Rather, it is a vision for the next 20 years. It's got a strategy for how to change the world, of which step number one is changing the left. Because the problem for the liberal and progressive forces is they've got beautiful programs, there's beautiful ideas, but the way that they are articulated never move to the level of speaking to the hearts of people, to the hunger that people have for a different kind of world, a world that is based on love, on kindness, on generosity. So when in this book, I try to tell, number one, how we can change that left. And I think that it's very important to stop acting as though everybody who isn't yet with us is necessarily a racist, a sexist, homophobe, a xenophobe, because that's what they hear all the time. They hear that message coming from what they perceive to be the liberal elite. Now, it's sort of unfair to call the liberal and progressive forces an elite, but it is true that a significant section of those people who are the top 20% of income earners and or wealth holders are liberal and progressive and look down on the rest of the population as being unsuccessful. Why
So even with well-meaning and well-intentioned ideas and policies, it's not enough. So you first talk about raising consciousness, a consciousness toward this caring society, correct?
Yes, but in order to be raising a consciousness, we have to be a caring. We ourselves have to be caring. We need to create what I'm calling a love-infused socialism. Or another way of
socialism of the heart.
A socialism of the heart, or another way of putting it, I call it a love and justice movement. A love and justice movement.
Which could manifest itself into a party, correct?
Which I think should play the same role that the cursed Tea Party played in the Republican Party. On the one hand, being a challenge to the mainstream, and on the other hand, being willing to move away and even oppose the mainstream of the Democratic Party, if that needs to be the case, if that's the only way that we can move away from the kind of politics that we've seen from the leadership of the Democratic Party.
Right.
It's manifested right now in their refusal to have a presidential candidates debate focused on the environment.
Right.
So what I do in this book is to first lay out why this has happened and how this has happened. And it's happened in part because though we live in many of us in the liberal and progressive world challenge the capitalism. We challenge it primarily on its failure to deliver the economic goods. As an ally of the Clintons used to say, it's the economy, stupid. Well, it turns out that many people in the liberal and progressive world still think that way, that it's what people want is economic entitlements and political rights, period.
A very mechanistic, deterministic argument, correct? Very narrow-minded.
Reductionist.
Reductionist, yes.
Now, how do I have the chutzpah to say that I know that that's not true? Well, it's this. I've been a psychotherapist for the past 40 plus years. Okay. And I received a grant from the National Institute of Mental Health beginning a few decades ago, to study the psychodynamics of American working people in the world of work and family life. And what I discovered was that a huge number of people, particularly those who are moving, who had been moving starting in the Reagan years, moving away from the left and towards the right, that a fair number of those people were moving there not because they agreed with the racism, the sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and all the other evils of the right, but rather because they were sick and tired of being put down by the left. Now, this startled us who were studying this, because we had always thought that having desire for something besides money and rights was something that we intellectuals or we social change activists had, but that the vast majority of Americans, they were just racist, sexist, homophobic, etc. But what I heard was that a lot of people, middle-income working people, hear the following message: you people are stupid. Mm-hmm. You're racist, you're sexist, you're homophobic, you're xenophobic, you're anti-Semitic, you're Islamophobic, and so of course we can't reach you, and you're fools. But listen, let me tell you about our economic programs, and maybe some of you will come back.
So a very condescending, paternalistic attitude, really not seeing them as full developed human beings that are worthy of their love and respect and so on.
Right. So now, but look, why in the world would this hurt people so much? Why would it drive people to ally themselves with somebody like Trump and his forces that they know to be not likely to serve their economic interests? Well, the answer here is twofold. Number one, because the Clintons and then the Obamas, that is their administrations and they themselves, did not deliver material well-being. The distance between the top 10% of the population's economic well-being and the bottom 80% has been steady. It has not been reduced when the Obamas were in power or when the Clintons were in power. The Democratic Party has a good line to put forward in its every 4 years in its presidential its platform. But when it comes to the actual, what it actually did,
delivers, it's
and we know
very
that
compromised.
Clinton came. I mean,
and
Obama
you worked with the Clintons.
This was the biggest economic crisis that the country had faced since the Great Depression, and he promised, to be somebody who was going to be really caring about ordinary people. Right. What happens? He gives all the money to the largest corporations and the investment companies and banks to bail them out. But he does, when he could have, at the very minimum, said, for every dollar I give to an investment bank or to a corporation, we're going to give a dollar to somebody who has been kicked out of their home because of the outrageous mortgage affair. Okay, so
no, you know what?
Even that minimum thing.
No, I get it. Yeah.
And throughout his presidency, he was continually calling on people to be compromising. He would say, "I'm for the environment." Then he would open up more space for oil drilling.
You know what, Michael? You know what we're gonna do? I'm gonna, in just a couple minutes. I think it might be a nice segue here to play about 3 minutes of your incredible speech, your eulogy at the Muhammad Ali funeral, and we'll get some pictures of, little snide smiles here and there from Bill Clinton. Now, you're not going to be able to see this, but you certainly know you were there. And the segment starts with, "We all have to be Muhammad Ali." So
I was very honored to be asked by
set that up for us.
Somebody who spoke at his funeral.
Right.
I've been a friend of his for many, many decades.
Right. Okay, so let's play that, and let's have you then comment about what you talked about and how it relates to the book.
How do we honor Muhammad Ali? And the answer is, the way to honor Muhammad Ali is to be Muhammad Ali today. And that means us, everyone here and everyone listening. It's up to us to continue that ability to speak truth to power. We must speak out, refuse to follow the path of conformity to the rules of the game in life. We must refuse to follow the path of conformity. Tell the 1% who own 80% of the wealth of this country that it's time to share that wealth. Tell the politicians who use violence worldwide and then preach into nonviolence to the oppressed that it's time for them to end their drone warfare and every other form of warfare, to close our bases around the world, to bring the troops home. Tell those who created mass incarceration that it's time to create a guaranteed income for everyone in our society. Tell judges to let out of prison the many African Americans swept up by racist police and imprisoned by racist judges. And many of them in prison today for offenses like possessing marijuana that white people get away with all the time. Tell our elected officials to imprison those who authorized torture and those who ran the big banks and investment companies that caused the economic collapse of 2008. Tell the leaders of Turkey to stop killing the Kurds. Tell Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu that the way to get security is for Israel is to stop the occupation of the West Bank and help create a Palestinian state. Tell the next president of the United States that she Tell the next president of the United States that she should seek a constitutional amendment to make all national and state elections funded by Congress and the state legislatures and all other sources of money be banned, including money from corporations, from individuals, all other money, make it all public funding.
Great. Michael, you were able to see that, right?
I saw it, but I didn't hear it. I don't know what I actually
well, you were in great form. You know what you said there. We all have to be Muhammad Ali. What do you think Clinton was saying to his associate there after listening to this?
Clinton knew by this time, but long before, that I had been strongly critical of him. So he wasn't too happy to hear me, speaking. But let me say
sure.
This. Yes, I say be Muhammad Ali, but that we need to embody the courage of that man who stood up for his principles and do that for ourselves. But like Muhammad Ali, and people don't know this mostly about Muhammad Ali, he was also a very sweet and gentle person. He wasn't in personal relationships aggressive in the way that he was in the ring. And that was how I built a wonderful relationship with him that was based on caring for each other. So,
so he represents a lot of what you're trying
Yes.
to tell us
Yes.
about here in the book, right?
Yes, people, when they hear what I'm saying right now, they often think, wait a second, is he telling us that we have to be caring towards the racists and the sexists and the homophobes, et cetera, the anti-Semites who rally around Trump? No, I'm not talking about responding to his core haters. That's a step long into the future. What we need to do now is to talk to a sector of those who have either didn't vote in 2016 or did vote for him, not because they were on his side, but because they were rebelling against the establishment as they understood it, and they see the left as that establishment. Now, people here then, and people who are likely to be listening to this are going to be saying, how could they think such a thing? We also have caring feelings. We believe in love. We believe in a world of kindness and compassion. Yes, you know what? That's true about what you believe in. But when they see, who do they hear when they don't hear you? Who they hear is Hillary Clinton. They hear the Obamas. They hear the people who are at the top, who are projected by the media as the officials of the Democrats. They don't know about the rest of us and our caring way. So what I'm saying is we need a different kind of movement that puts caring and love, I call it the caring society, caring for each other and caring for the earth, at the center. And how do you put that at the center? By demanding a new bottom line. Today, the old bottom line is that every institution, corporations, our economy, our healthcare system, our education system, our cultural system gets judged efficient, rational, and productive to the extent that they maximize money and power. We have to put at the center of our politics the notion of a new bottom line of love and caring, kindness and generosity, ethical and environmental sensitivity and action. A bottom line that includes looking at other human beings, not from the standpoint of what they can do for us, not in terms of their instrumentalist or utilitarian use, but rather to see every human being as an embodiment of the sacred and valuable for themselves, whether or not they ever do anything to advance our own interests. And similarly, to look at the earth, not simply as a commodity that can be turned into something that you can sell in order to make more money, but rather even the good way of looking at that, to satisfy some of human needs. It's not just there for satisfy human needs. The earth needs to be looked at with awe and reverence, radical amazement at the grandeur of this universe. That message, that new bottom line that I've just articulated, would change totally the way that the liberal and progressive forces are experienced by people who are not yet with us, or people who even rebelled against us and say, "Phooey, you hate us, so we hate you back." But the truth of the matter is, and this is the sad truth, is that for many people on the left, what they say are things that are hateful. They say things about people that make people feel like, oh, all men are racist. All whites are racist, and all men are sexist. That message gets communicated. And of course, the right understands that's such great.
That's their language.
That's so great for them. So they do everything they can to promote,
disrupt and divide. Right. Well, you're saying a lot there. So can we break it down a little more, little by little here? It's a psychological issue, it's a spiritual issue, it's an economics, it's an intellectual and political economic, and so on. Your background, you were starting to say about as a psychotherapist.
Yes, I want to say one more thing.
Go ahead.
Why do people feel so put down? Why do they hear when Hillary Clinton says that
deplorables?
are a bundle of deplorables. Why do they say, yeah, I already knew that's what they all think about us, those people in the liberal world and the progressive world. And so they don't want to hear any rest of the message. They don't want to know the details of our programs, because they think that we hate them. And the truth of the matter is that many of us act that way towards them. We have to change that fundamentally. But why they get so upset about it has to do with the other evil of capitalism. See, the evil of capitalism is not solely that it's unequal wealth and power, that it's unfair. It's also that it spreads the message that
it's demeaning, it's disrespectful.
The people on the left laugh at people's religion and make people feel that we think we have contempt for their culture, even though 60% of Americans say that they go to church at least once a month. Probably not true, but nevertheless, they want to be seen that way because they care about their religion. And yet the liberal and left world has contempt, has a religiophobia. It won't pay attention to people who are coming from any kind of religious standpoint. We want them to come to our demonstrations. We want them to vote for us, but then we hope that they will evolve to a higher level and not, so that they give up those silly religious ideas. Well, the people and the rest of the population hear that, and they feel like, okay, you have contempt for me and my religion and my culture, then I have contempt for you back. So, but it's so hurtful because the society, the capitalist marketplace, projects the notion that we live in a meritocracy, a society in which you can make it if you really try, and that where you end up is simply a function of how good you are. Right. Now that makes people feel terrible. They're already feeling terrible about themselves, and then they encounter the left, and the left says, you know, you shouldn't only feel terrible about where you are in the class structure. You should also feel terrible about the fact that you're racist, sexist, homophobic, and stupid.
Right.
It's so the left, liberal and progressive world need, and this is all laid out in much more detail and much more convincingly in the book Revolutionary Love, which unfortunately you can't find in the bookstores because the bookstores have already pre-decided that it's not going to sell, so they're not putting it out. So well, anyway,
we're gonna find it. You're going to be at Harvard December 3rd. It's going to be at the bookstore there. Then we're going to go to Princeton December 5th. So, and it's going to be on many more bookstores. But
they're not in Manhattan.
Well,
look,
all right.
They're not in Manhattan. That's why you have to go. If you want a copy of the book, you go to Tikkun, TIKKUN.org/LJ. And the LJ stands for Love and Justice.
Love and Justice.
Tikkun.org/LJ.
Okay. Michael, yes, Michael, can we also now turn a little bit to understand, you mentioned Abraham Joshua Heschel before, and I want to also have a clip from Zalman Schachter. Some of the influences within the Jewish prophetic world that formed the Jewish renewal movement, which you've been so active in, that's informed this book as well. So what we're going to try and do is short little clips of Abraham Joshua Heschel first, and then you comment on it. And the first one we'll have is the one where he is talking about people, some are guilty, all are responsible.
Completing a documentary on Heschel called Praying with My Legs. Brand gathered powerful recollections from those who had known him and who wish his prophetic voice were still sounding.
Pick 'em up and lay 'em down right.
It was his participation in the civil rights movement that first. This weekend of Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, religious services are planned around the country to remember him and his legacy. Some of them will be in synagogues that are honoring both King and the late Abraham Joshua Heschel, one of King's many courageous supporters. Heschel is widely considered to be one of the greatest American religious figures of the last century, a rabbi, theologian, social activist, and mystic, admired by Christians as well as Jews. He would have been 101 years old this month. Our segment was produced by Steve Brand, a New York filmmaker who is completing a documentary on Heschel called Praying with My Legs. Brand gathered powerful recollections from those who had known him and who wish his prophetic voice were still sounding.
Pick 'em up and lay 'em down right.
It was his participation in the civil rights movement that first made Heschel widely known. In a famous photo of the Selma March in 1965, its leaders wearing garlands, Heschel was the white man with the prophet's beard, two to the right of Dr. King. That was the occasion on which Heschel said he felt he was praying with his legs.
God is either the father of all men or of no men. And the idea of judging a person in terms of black or brown or white is an eye disease.
Heschel also publicly and passionately opposed the war in Vietnam.
How can I pray when I have on my conscience the awareness that I am co-responsible for the death of innocent people in Vietnam? In a free society, some are guilty, all are responsible.
The war in Vietnam for Heschel was an ultimate act of dehumanization, to no longer even see that there was an enemy on the other side who was a human being. And Heschel was convinced that if I act with a disregard for the humanity of my fellow human being, I am really ultimately attacking God.
Heschel's daughter Susanna teaches Jewish studies at Dartmouth College.
My father was sleepless over Vietnam. He would be up late at night, 1, 2, 3 in the morning, couldn't sleep. He was so upset. It was on his mind all the time.
Heschel's experience of the Holocaust was one reason for his social activism. He had seen close up what racism and apathy can do, and how violence toward human beings often begins with the abuse of language.
Hitler, he said, did not come to power with tanks and machine guns. Hitler came to power with words.
Heschel was raised in Warsaw and did graduate study in Berlin. Just 6 weeks before World War II, he was able to escape from Europe. Heschel's late wife, Sylvia, remembered.
There were sisters of his who were killed. That was a very painful thing for him, very. His mother died of a heart attack as soon as the Nazi came to the door. She just fell to the ground. It was awful.
But Heschel never blamed God.
He said God didn't do it, man did it.
Heschel's biographer is Edward Kaplan.
There are moments in which he talks about overcoming despair and overcoming gloom. But the response to the catastrophe is not to focus on the catastrophe, but to focus on human possibilities.
When you ask Heschel, where was God during the Holocaust? His answer was always, of course, where was man? But if you read Heschel carefully, I would say God cares. God weeps with man at his sufferings. God participates in human suffering. And therefore, God was there in the Holocaust.
Whenever I get a little down or depressed, I go get one of his books and I read the prophet Isaiah and what he has to say about Isaiah. Because Isaiah was written at a time of the desolation of Israel. And yet it's the loftiest vision of dreams for humankind. It's people's ability to have faith in the midst of persecution and destruction.
At the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York, Heschel was a professor of social ethics and mysticism, two powerful strands of Jewish thought. From the prophets, he learned to speak out about the world's evils. From his ancestors, who were Hasidic Jews, known for their ecstatic spirituality, he learned to celebrate life.
I say that this world in itself is so fantastically mysterious, so challengingly marvelous, that not to realize that there is more than I see, then there's endlessly more than I can express or even conceive, just being underdeveloped. intellectually.
One of Heschel's main attempts in getting to you, in a sense, is his own sense of radical amazement. To be aware of so many different things. Did you notice the trees? Well, Heschel was in love with trees. You're walking in Riverside Park. Don't forget the trees, you know. Don't forget the river. You have to react.
Heschel described the spiritual power he felt as the ineffable.
Oh, ineffable. He loved that word. That which is inexplainable, but you know is there. It points to something beyond that which we pray to, meaning God.
Heschel's biographer notes his use of dramatic language to try to reach others' hearts, not just their minds. He read a Heschel description of a mystical experience.
A moment comes like a thunderbolt, in which a flash of the undisclosed rends our dark apathy asunder. The ineffable has shuddered itself into the soul. It has entered our consciousness like a ray of light passing into a lake. I can't believe that someone could write a passage like this without having experienced it himself.
Heschel's deep spirituality drew many Christians to him, among them the Catholic priest and anti-Vietnam War activist Daniel Berrigan, who became a friend.
I was seeing someone who was immersed totally in his own religious tradition and was at the same time charmingly ecumenical, you know, and open to others. I began to understand that the two went together, that if you were a person of deep faith, you were open to others. And you didn't draw lines or boundaries or say, we're inside the circle and others are out. He was one of the chosen who believed that everyone was chosen, and that the very fact of existing in the world meant you were chosen.
Heschel fought all anti-Semitism. He campaigned for the rights of Jews in the Soviet Union, and at the Second Vatican Council in the 1960s, he lobbied hard against church teachings that demeaned Jews or anticipated their conversion.
I came out with a very strong rebuke. I'd say I'd rather go to Auschwitz and give up my religion. And that my being Jewish is so sacred to me that I am ready to die for it.
Over his lifetime, Heschel published 18 books and more than 100 essays. He was driven to show the relevance of Jewish scripture to modern life. In the Sabbath, he saw time as something to be made holy. In Man is Not Alone and other volumes, he said God expects and depends on human beings to carry out his will.
So Heschel can say to the world, you know, the challenge today is nihilism. He says the enemy we all face is nihilism. The world is going to hell. The sense of meaninglessness is pervasive, and we have to do something about this.
His friends say Heschel did a lot about it by what he taught, and even more by how he lived.
We are called upon to be an image of God. You see, God is absent, invisible, and the task of a human being is to represent the divine, to be a reminder of the presence of God.
1 year after he said that, Heschel died on December 23, 1972. He was just 65 years old.
Okay, Michael, I don't know, were you able to see that clip of Abraham Joshua Heschel? Well, all right, why you comment and you studied with him. How does his work inform you? The ineffable. Tell us a little about your relationship with him and how his ideas influence this book.
Well, I mean, I was totally mentored by him. I was at the Jewish Theological Seminary, and he was a major force in shaping my life and my activism. So I love the man, and he showed me that the kind of Judaism that I had experienced growing up in the big, impressive, well-financed synagogues of the world, that Judaism was deadly. It didn't have the prophetic spirit. It didn't have the love energy that was central to Judaism. And I didn't know that it was central to Judaism until I started to read him when I was aged 12. And then at 13, met him. And then he invited me to come visit him at the seminary several times, twice a year for several years until I got into Columbia and at Columbia College, and then taking some courses at the seminary. He arranged a one-on-one meeting with me that was a regular feature of my life for a good long time through all the years that I was at Columbia. So it shaped a lot, and I was proud to be with him in some of the demonstrations and in some of the important events in his life. He came to visit me when I was teaching at Trinity College. He came to sit in on a class that I had done. Best thing that ever happened, most amazing thing, was when I taught a course on Heschel at Camp Ramah in the summer, and he came and sat in on the class for several sessions and told me he loved it. And I was, Harvey Cox at Harvard Divinity School talked about my book, Jewish Renewal, and said that this book will take its place along with the teachings of the works of Martin Buber and Abraham Joshua Heschel. Well, I'm not going to claim that that's true. It's high praise, but what I want to say is that it's very important for us to bring into our social change movement a recognition of the value of a spiritual dimension. So I've talked about the psychological issues that lead people to be distanced from us, but people need to hear that we are seeking a world that is not only a world of equality in the material realm, but it's also a world in which we are encouraged to connect to the amazing reality of being alive, to the amazing reality of a universe that is beyond our comprehension, and 100 billion galaxies. Unbelievable that we are lucky to have the capacity to think in those kinds of broad terms, and to comprehend the little part that we can comprehend, and to celebrate it together. That element gets put down by almost everybody on the left, is saying, "Oh no, that's that religious stuff, or that's spiritual bullshit," or some,
Michael, isn't that changing though? In the opening, there are more and more people coming around to this. So I'm not so sure it's as much of a problem on the left as you may be. In my experience in the last few years or so, I think that's changing. Let me put it that way. Aren't you aware of that, or don't you think that's happening?
Well, people say that Tikkun Magazine has played an influential role in doing that.
Probably.
And Marianne Williamson came to my to speak. I invited her to speak at two of my high holiday services in the past. So I appreciate all that. Marianne Williamson is an example of somebody whose spirituality is being put down because it doesn't connect to any concrete programs on the other side. This is what's different about this book, Revolutionary Love. It has both a spiritual and psychological dimension, but it also has radical programs. For example, the Environmental and Social Responsibility Amendment to the Constitution that we are proposing, that among other things, you've got to read this, that number one bans all money from politics except money given equally by the state legislatures or the federal government to all the major candidates. Equal money to all of those, and no other money of any sort allowed. But beyond that, it also replaces the way that the president is chosen and makes it by direct vote and not by the college.
Electoral college.
Yeah, the electoral college.
Which
and most importantly, it requires that corporations, all major corporations with incomes above $50 million a year, have to get a new corporate charter once every 5 years, which will only be granted if they can prove a satisfactory history of environmental and social responsibility to a jury of ordinary citizens who are receiving information from people all around the world who've been affected by the impact of that corporation on their environment and on their social reality. Now, why a jury? Because we don't trust the government won't be filled with the kinds of crazies that the Trump people have filled it with, or actually that the Obamas and the Clintons filled it with, people who are tight to the corporate elite. But I have to say that right now, I have another interview. I can't stay on very much longer. Actually, 3 minutes.
All right, that's perfect. That's exactly what we need.
Sorry.
Sit down. That's okay. We're going to talk about this much more. And you're going to come to the East Coast here, and you'll be going to Harvard, right? You're going to be speaking at where now? The first
Harvard bookstore in Cambridge on December the 3rd. And
at some church, right? The first.
No, that's at the Harvard book.
Right.
And on the 5th, I'm speaking at Princeton in a bookstore there whose name I'm forgetting.
Labyrinth, isn't it? I think it's the Labyrinth.
Okay.
Right. Well, we're going to drive down for that. And look, I know that you've been on the go. This is a fabulous book. It's so helpful at so many different levels, philosophical, theoretical, but it offers, again, the concrete policies and programs that we need. And it takes us, again, as you said, way beyond what we've been involved in politics and economic discussion for so many decades in this country.
I actually have a whole vision of what we are for. In other words, so many people only hear what we are against, but I have a whole section there of a vision of the world that we are for. But what I want to say to you is it's not in the bookstores in Manhattan. So you have to, and people have to go and insist that the bookstores carry it.
I will be my pick, but I'm also going to talk to your publicist, who is also involved in that.
The book is published by the University of California Press.
It is.
And it's not in the bookstores, and it requires people to go into the bookstores and insist that they get Revolutionary Love by Rabbi Michael Lerner, published by the University of California Press. Jim, I love you. You know that. And I appreciate this interview. And I hope sometime in the future we'll do it again.
Yes, we've got to. We're going to do this when you're in town. But here it is again. Revolutionary Love. We're going to get it in the bookstores. That's why you're on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. We reach all of Manhattan, Bronx, parts of Queens, Brooklyn. So everybody now will know about this book, and we will go out and get it in the bookstore. So Michael, thank you. I'm going to see you soon in New York here. We're going to go out with your favorite song, Imagine by John Lennon. There's a whole bunch of other stuff I want to talk to you about, Israel and all kinds of stuff. We'll do that at another time. You promise?
Yes.
All right. Okay, no fires in the background. You're doing well. Thank you so very, very much. We'll see you next week on the Radical Imagination. This is Jim Vrettos. All the best. Have a great week.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us, only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's